You know, it's fascinating to hear that the reason we potentially haven't found that there's life in other planets is Adolf Hitler. If you don't know who Avi Loeb is by now, let me fill you in.
All the way from Harvard University. Please join me in welcoming to the stage our guest tonight, Dr. Avi Loeb.
A team of researchers, including Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb,
renowned astrophysicist Avi Loeb,
Professor Loeb is a Frank B. Baird Jr. Professor of Science at Harvard University. He has authored 8 books and over 800 scientific papers.
may have just found a trace of an interstellar object in the ocean.
Loeb's audacious theory sends shockwaves through the scientific community.
Professor Loeb, he is a Harvard professor and head of the Galileo Project, has just come back from a trip that he says has advanced our understanding.
He posits that this interstellar interloper may, in fact, be a clandestine emissary from a distant civilization.
You know, if we believe that we are alone and special and unique, that shows arrogance.
Avi Loeb became well known when he first identified Oumuamua, an interstellar meteor, as being not a meteor. He first posited that it could potentially be an extraterrestrial object, our first extraterrestrial object that we've identified. The reason he gave? Its trajectory. Apparently, it had taken a different course than what was expected of a standard comet. There was the predicted expected trajectory, and then the actual trajectory of Oumuamua. And that difference is what made Avi think something could be up. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
How do you prefer to be called? Professor Loeb, Avi? I don't want to
Avi,
be
Avi,
rude.
that would be fine. Avi is fine.
I'm from Texas, so we're all about
Yeah,
manners.
I can see that you are informal. You have a fireplace behind you. I would much rather be dressed like you, much more casually, but I didn't know who I'm meeting, so.
Oh, well, I apologize. This is me
I was,
dressed up.
let's put it different. I was dressed much better when I jogged this morning. I jog every morning at 5 a.m. or so.
Wow. Okay.
I would have kept the same uniform if I knew that you will be informal.
Absolutely. Again, this is me dressed up, Avi. I'm an ex-chef, so I come from wearing chef coats. We're not very dressy up people, you know.
Okay, we can start whenever you want. It will be 1 hour, right? Or how much is in?
Yes, that's what I have. But honestly, if you need to go before, what you tell me. I'm
let's do it 1 hour because after that, someone else will be waiting for me. So we can do it 1 hour, and you're recording the video as well, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
Yes, sir.
So you can start whenever you want, and you can ask me anything. Don't hesitate on
Excellent.
anything. Okay.
Well, look, I'm not going to do a long-winded introduction as far as your credential and stuff. I do a separate introduction, and I've seen some interviews where you just like to be referred to as the farm boy. So
Exactly,
you know,
exactly.
right?
That would save us time. Yeah.
Yeah, not going to get into that. So look, I'm going to jump right in. I have a question that I haven't seen anyone ask you or heard, and maybe they have. Let's jump in. Have you personally, Avi, ever had a UFO sighting aside from Oumuamua?
No. And Oumuamua was not my sighting. It was other astronomers. So I got into it from the perspective of a scientist. There was astronomical data, and this object that was reported looked really weird. And I feel like the kid in Hans Christian Andersen's folktale who said the emperor has no clothes, and here the emperor is Oumuamua, this object from 2017, and the clothes are cometary tail that he doesn't have. And I just said, he doesn't have a cometary tail, therefore it's not a comet. And even now, just a few days ago, there was a paper that was published in Nature magazine trying to argue that there is a cometary tail, it's just invisible, sort of like the adults watching the parade and arguing, the emperor has invisible clothes. And, you know, to me, it's very much common sense to say if the definition of a comet is that it has a coma and gas and dust around it, and you don't see that, then it's not a comet. Why is that so difficult for the mainstream of astronomy to accept? Of course, the object showed an excess push away from the sun, but let's explain it not as a result of the rocket effect, because we didn't see anything coming out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually saw an interview you just did with Dr. Brian Keating. Shout out to that podcast. It's absolutely amazing. So I'm going to put a link in the description so people can find out more and get deep into the weeds with some of that information that you explained during that.
Sure.
So yeah, I saw
Thank you.
all of that. Absolutely, of course. So look, I saw you mention a story on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast about Winston Churchill and searching for life in the universe pre-World War II. And as much as I love Joe Rogan, he kind of didn't let you finish that and what you thought about it. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to just retell that story and its implications, what you feel that meant.
Well, so Winston Churchill, he was a historian. He was also a very good writer, and he actually wrote an essay about extraterrestrial life and the search for other civilizations, and didn't have a chance to publish it because he became prime minister in England during the Second World War and was very much engaged in curing human self-inflicted wounds, so to speak. And then eventually it came to light, this essay. But what I said is, if we were to invest all the energy and human lives and resources that were wasted basically on the Second World War, if we were to invest it in science, we could have learned much more about the question that was of interest to him before the war, whether extraterrestrials are out there. And in fact, I did a calculation just a month ago, which is the amount of money that we are spending on military budgets worldwide is $2 trillion a year. And my point is, if we were to listen to the words of John Lennon, when he said, imagine all the people living in peace, and we were to accept his vision and say, it's a waste of our energy, resources to try and kill each other, let's live together as equal members of the human species. Who cares how much territory a given nation has, and that we should not waste lives of people and resources on, killing others for that purpose. Then we would suddenly have a surplus of $2 trillion a year. And what can we do with it? Well, one thing we can do is space exploration. And it turns out that with that money, you can send a CubeSat, a probe, to every star in the Milky Way galaxy within a few decades. So by the end of this century, we would be able to send a probe to every star, tens of billions of them in the Milky Way galaxy. Just think about it, using conventional rocket propellants, and they would get to those stars within 500 million years. So what I'm saying is, imagine another civilization which is better than us. Last night, I participated in a fireside chat in a public library, and after the chat, a kid came to me, and I love kids because they are unbiased. They are still they have their beginner's mind, which is a term that the Zen Buddhism advocates. And so the kid came to me and said, "Do you think extraterrestrials are smarter than we are?" And I said, I surely hope so, because then we can learn from them how and aspire to have a better future than our past. And that's what I said to the kid. And I believe in that. So if you just imagine another civilization being better than us, smarter than us, in other words, exploring space and, rather than killing each other, then the probes that they send might be inside the solar system, close to us. And when you go to your backyard at home, then, you find rocks, and you might assume, okay, anything that comes from the cosmic street must be the rocks of the type that I see in my backyard. Well, that's wrong, because every now and then you get a tennis ball that was thrown by a neighbor. And only over the past decade, we were able to search for objects that came from outside the solar system, from outside our neighborhood, and sort of from the cosmic street. And guess what? The first three objects looked anomalous. The first two were meteors, roughly a meter in size, and they are much tougher than all the space rocks we had seen from the solar system. And we are going after one of them this summer, actually, to figure out its composition. Why was it so much tougher than rocks that we are familiar with? And the third object from interstellar space was Oumuamua, this object discovered in 2017 that had a lot of peculiarities that I wrote my book, Extraterrestrial, about, and that some people still try to explain as an iceberg, without great success, I should add.
Do you think if we had spent that money back when Winston Churchill had brought it up, and today, do you think we would already have that answer?
Oh, definitely. I'm quite sure about that, because it's a road that was not taken. What we did in the past 70 years was following the direction of Frank Drake, who basically realized we are using radio communication, so why don't we check for radio signals from other civilizations, which is pretty much like waiting at home for a phone call. You need the counterpart to be active. Yeah. And if nobody is calling you, you will not hear anything at the time that you are listening. Of course, they might call you, before you were born, which is the case if, most stars formed billions of years before the sun. So we may have heard radio signals here on Earth. They intercepted the Earth billions of years ago. We just came to the scene only a few million years ago. So, and we developed radio communication only over the past century, 127 years since Marconi. So, we were never around to listen. And now these signals are billions of light years away. So good luck if you're trying to listen to them. And these civilizations might be dead by now. So that's why nobody is calling us. That's a very different approach than the one I'm advocating. I'm saying, instead of looking for signals that arrive to us at the speed of light, which escape from the Milky Way galaxy, let's look for packages in our mailbox. And those spacecraft, like the ones that we launched to interstellar space, they move at a speed that is 10,000 times smaller than the speed of light. So they are bound by the gravity of the Milky Way galaxy. So they are still around, sort of like plastic trash in the oceans. By 2050, the mass of plastics in the ocean would be larger than the mass in fish. So the weight of all the plastic in the oceans would be more than fish. Just because humans pollute the ocean with plastic, they don't stop. And so my point is, it keeps accumulating over time. And the same is about the packages that were sent into the Milky Way galaxy. All the space trash that is not functional by now may be out there. And we can find it because it never escaped the Milky Way galaxy. So it keeps accumulating, just like plastic in the ocean. And all we need to do is look out. And that was not done. Only over the past decade, we started detecting interstellar objects. And I'm intrigued by the fact that the first three of them looked anomalous. I'm saying, okay, well, that's interesting, because maybe the universe is sending us a signal that, we should not assume that what we have in our backyard is the same as what comes from the cosmic street. A lot of people have a problem with admitting that we are not the smartest in our cosmic neighborhood or in the cosmos in general. People prefer to believe that we are unique and special, and there is nothing like us. We are the pinnacle of creation. And of course, the best way to win the competition, the cosmic competition, the best way to win it is if we are alone, right? If there is nobody to compete with,
sure,
we won. But if there is another kid in our cosmic block, that might be challenging for us. And, my daughters, when they were young, and they tended to believe that they are the smartest in the world because they compare themselves to the family members that were at home. And once we took them to the kindergarten, they realized that there is a smarter kid on the block. So that's really the psyche, that makes this subject so sensitive. I mean, there is a nerve in human existence. I mean, that many people are offended by the idea that there might be a smarter civilization out there, and as a result, they push back. And that includes the mainstream of the scientific community, my colleagues, that basically ban any discussion on this, including the SETI community, which is supposed to be my partner. They are supposed to say, okay, that's great that you are examining a package in our mailbox, which is different than the approach that we took over the past decades of listening to a radio signal or waiting for a phone call. That's great. No, they don't say that. They say a discussion about objects near Earth that may represent technological civilizations beyond Earth should be banned from all conferences on SETI. And that decision was made a year and a half ago. So I say something is wrong with academia, because it looks like the government is extremely interested in this subject. They established a new office, which is supposed to document all anomalies about objects in our atmosphere, because they keep seeing things. I mean, it's their day job to monitor the atmosphere and look for suspicious objects, because they have to protect the nation from ballistic missiles and other risks, national security risks. So they, as part of the day job, they see things and they get curious. So they establish this office, which is supposed to get to the bottom of it. And the public is extremely interested. Yet you have those fund allocation committees that are funding research, scientific research, populated by mainstream scientists who basically say, we don't want to take risky propositions. We don't want to waste taxpayers' money. And I say, well, if you ask the taxpayers, they would tell you that this question is more exciting for them, and they want their taxpayers' money to be used to answer this question, more so than any of the other questions that you decide to allocate funds to. There is no federal funding for research on this subject. And therefore, after my book appeared, a number of very wealthy individuals decided to contribute to my research account, and I established the Galileo Project, which aims to study those objects near Earth that might be of extraterrestrial technological origins. So we are breaking the mold with this project in the sense that it's a circular argument. It is self-fulfilling prophecy to say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and then not seek the evidence. Obviously, if you're not seeking the evidence, you will not find any extraordinary evidence. But actually, that's not what physicists do, the scientists do, because for several decades, there was an extraordinary claim that a new symmetry of nature exists. It was called supersymmetry. And mainstream physicists said, yeah, definitely. I mean, since I started doing physics, like 35 years ago, they were saying this supersymmetry must be in a natural range of parameters. Let's build an accelerator that will smash particles so that we can see evidence for particles associated with this symmetry that may account also for the dark matter, most of the matter in the universe. And then $10 billion were invested. Nobody said it's an extraordinary claim that requires extraordinary evidence, therefore we shouldn't work on it. They said, no, that's an extraordinary claim. Let's put $10 billion to testing it. And guess what? We didn't find anything with the Large Hadron Colliders so far. But the way science is done is, if there is something intriguing, you spend money. So I say extraordinary evidence requires extraordinary funding. Okay, rather than the statement that is Sagan's standard. My standard is extraordinary evidence requires extraordinary funding. And, if we spend the money on the search, it's a road that was never taken. And there is a chance that we will find some low-hanging fruit.
It's fascinating to hear that the reason we potentially haven't found that there's life in other planets is Adolf Hitler. Because he started World War II. We can blame Adolf for that too.
I think we came from a long history. The human species existed for a few million years. Okay, and most of this history was shaped by zero-sum games. In other words, if one tribe benefits, it's at the expense of another tribe. Sure. That's why we have polarization in politics right now. Sure. But what I wanted to suggest is science is not zero-sum game. Science is an infinite sum game, where if you gain new knowledge about nature, everyone benefits, because then you ask new questions and you gain even more knowledge. So it's like an infinite frontier. You can benefit forever. In George Orwell's 1984, the novel that he wrote, the party's slogan was "Ignorance is strength." Now, you might think that this doesn't apply today. you might think that scientists would never advocate that.
Sure.
But just over the past 2 weeks, I heard about a distinguished scientist who said, I don't really want to know whether the COVID-19 virus came from the wet market in Wuhan or from a lab leak. And in other words, ignorance is strength, according to that person.
Wow.
And why do we need to change that slogan? As I told my students in class, I said, knowledge is strength, because if there was a biological Chernobyl that was responsible for this pandemic, we need to know that to prevent it in the future. And the same is true about our cosmic neighborhood. You know, we need to explore it to figure out if there is a smarter kid on our cosmic block, because then we can learn from it. It could be even beneficial economically, financially, to entrepreneurs, because they could import technologies of the future to Earth. If we realize, you know, that there are gadgets that are not represented by our existing technologies, like if we find iPhone 100 instead of whatever we have. So my point is, it could be beneficial even business-wise, and obviously intellectually. You know, I am seeking intelligence in outer space because I don't often find it here on Earth.
We have a saying in Texas: a person can be smart, but a group of people is stupid. So yeah, I totally.
By the way, in
understand.
academia, I should say in academia, it's represented by committees. So when you have large committees, you are basically reducing the decisions made to the lowest common denominator. And that is pretty bad, actually.
That's very scary, honestly, to hear you say that. Absolutely. You know, there's a famous line from Jurassic Park, which I'm sure you've seen. Maybe you haven't, I don't know. Jeff Goldblum's character, Ian Malcolm, as he's speaking to the scientist, he asked, you know, should we, you know, we spent so much time asking if we could, but we didn't stop to think, should we?
I don't think you're giving us our due credit. Our scientists have done things which nobody's ever done before.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Just based on the context of, are we poking a bear by looking out right into space with the civilization? Do we need to worry about, like, I don't know, them coming in and, you know, taking us over or anything like that? Is that any real concern that we should have?
Well, that's an excellent question. And in fact, it was asked yesterday at the public library. And someone said that he would lose sleep after hearing me because he's worried about it. Now, I said, don't worry. I mean, I'm an optimist. I believe that it's most likely, since we developed our science and technology only over the past century. Basically, quantum mechanics was realized only a century ago. And now all the gadgets we use and the communication between the two of us is based on our understanding of quantum mechanics, which is just a century old. So most of the stars formed billions of years before the sun. And there was plenty of time for other civilizations to develop much more advanced science and technology. Just imagine, you know, thousands of years from now, millions of years from now, what will our science and technology be like? And my point is, we don't pose a threat. We are sort of like ants in the cracks of a pavement when a biker passes by. They are completely irrelevant. The biker has other items on their agenda, you know. So my point is, we should see it as an opportunity for us to learn, because it's most likely that they are far more advanced than we are. If we wanted to find a civilization that is less advanced than we are, we have to find it by, you know, going back to where we were, you know, millions of years ago. And you know, like in nature, we were indistinguishable from nature. So we have to board a ship, land on another planet, and start searching through the trees for those civilizations. It's a lot of work. You know, it's much easier to find those that are far more advanced than we are, because all you need to do is check if they're around you. Okay, yeah. They would arrive here. And we haven't done that, frankly. And when Enrico Fermi asked, where is everybody, like 70 years ago,
Sure.
That's very presumptuous. It's like sitting on the sofa at home and saying, where are my neighbors? Like, I don't see anyone around me. Like, why would they come for lunch at Los Alamos and sit next to you? I mean, you should look through your windows to find your neighbors, and you better use a telescope.
Everything you're saying to me is just a layman, just a normal person sounds completely logical. So it blows my mind.
I'm trying to be normal person. I don't see myself as any different than the common person. And I'm using I'm using common sense. It's just that
that's true.
It's just that common sense is not commonplace in academia.
Yeah.
People in academia would argue that they should not use taxpayers' money on a subject that is of great interest to the taxpayers, and I'm trying to correct that. And
thank you.
Hopefully, I will be able to do that. I mean, something is wrong with academia in the way that it selects topics, because I think it's our civil duty to address this subject of great interest to the public and the government. And moreover, if you look at academia in the mainstream of physics right now, the most prominent ideas are the multiverse or extra dimensions, and these are not even testable. And there is a culture of physicists that work on things that are not testable experimentally, just as a sandbox
stuff.
String theory, just as a sandbox for demonstrating their mathematical skills. So it doesn't really matter if it's real or not. But the problem with that is that that's not the tradition of physics. They are basically, it's like, suppose a plumber comes to your home and you say, well, I need to fix the toilet. And the plumber says, well, that's not something I can do. And then he asks, can you fix something else? And he says, no, I just want to think about very abstract things that have nothing to do with your toilet. And I say, well, you're not a plumber, okay? I mean, what we need physicists for is to explain to us what reality is, the reality that we all share, not put goggles on their head and imagine the metaverse where they are celebrities. That's not the goal of physics. And somehow there is a betrayal of the tradition of the profession. And the tradition of the profession is to be modest, not to show off. It's not about showing off. It's about collecting evidence and data and explaining it. So when you see something unusual, intriguing, you should be thrilled because it's an opportunity to learn something new. But when you work on a subject that has no contact with experimental data, with evidence, you should not be happy for 50 years like string theorists were.
Sure.
Because that's not the definition of your job. The definition of your job is to contrast your ideas with data so that you can tell if they're right or wrong. If you can't tell whether they're right or wrong, you may spend your entire life dreaming.
Sure. Why can't they just poll the public and ask what we want the money spent on? I bet you would find that the American public would be like, yes, let's go explore. I mean, we went to the moon and then everything just dropped off. I mean, my last name's Armstrong, no relation to Neil, at least not close to one. But like I think most of us, that's what we want. We want those answers.
That's what I want. But I will tell you, there is a sense of arrogance in the way that people who become professionals tend to believe that they know more, and therefore they will define. Nobody else will tell them what to do. They will define But the thing that troubles me, I have no problem with anyone defining what they want to work on, but you can't betray the tradition of your profession. You can't work on things that do not just like a plumber cannot put goggles on the head and say, I want to do it in the metaverse, because nobody would pay him for that. So the point is, you have to at least align yourself with the definition of the profession, which is, in the context of physics, understanding reality so that we can adapt to it. So in that sense, if you have the idea that no, we are the smartest in the universe, and then you realize there are objects near Earth that look intriguing, you want to test that idea rather than ridicule it and say that's complete nonsense and ban any discussion about it, which is the current culture. And I just don't understand how it's possible in this context.
To get back to Oumuamua, if I know, if it were to come back in our solar system, what would that mean exactly?
Well, it's interesting that you brought it up. We don't expect it to come back because its trajectory was shaped mainly by the sun's gravity. It was
Sure.
pushed. It was pushed by some non-gravitational force, which I
But if it
suggest.
did, that would definitely mean, right? Wouldn't that
Oh.
have to mean something?
Oh yeah, that would mean that it has propulsion,
Right.
but we will have a better telescope to monitor the sky. It's called, I call it a dating app, because it will allow us to date the next Oumuamua.
Oh, I like that.
So this dating app is the Vera Rubin Observatory in Chile that will start operations in a year, and it has a camera of 3.2 billion pixels, so 1,000 times more pixels
Wow.
than your cell phone camera. And it
Holy
will
cow.
survey the southern sky every 4 days. And surely, if there will be another Oumuamua, it will notice it. And we expect that to happen every year. So we will, most of the time, probably, most of the time, we will swipe to the left. But every now and then, we might find an exciting
Find a match.
object.
Yeah, find a
exactly.
match.
It's just like a dating event where, after the person left the room, you realize, I actually would like to know more about this person, but then you don't have the person's email address or phone number or anything. So rather than obsess with that person, you should date more and find someone similar. And that's what we could do with the next Oumuamua. And of course, my hope is we will get a close-up image of it, photograph, because that would be worth 66,000 words that I put into my book. I wouldn't write the book. Why would I waste my time talking about it if we can just look at an image? But in fact, we have the Webb telescope, which is 1 million miles away from Earth. And so if it observes the object and we observe it from the Earth, then it's as if you have two eyes and you can pinpoint the trajectory of the object in 3 dimensions very precisely, and that will tell us whether there is some internal propulsion, because we will be able to see exactly how it moves in 3 dimensions with a Webb telescope and a telescope on Earth. So I'm very much looking forward to the coming years. I think, we will know more. That's the way science is done, not by prejudice, not by the number of likes on Twitter. I should tell you, there was actually a poll yesterday of 1,000 people on Twitter. And it surprised me, because the poll was, do you think Oumuamua was an iceberg, a comet, an asteroid, or a technological relic? And 51% of the respondents said a technological object. Wow. 20% said an asteroid, 10% said a comet, and then the rest an iceberg. So that was interesting, that people are so interested in the technological possibility. Of course, science is not decided by public opinion, but it shows you that people are really curious about it. And the way, that the pushback that is coming from the direction of the mainstream of scientists is just inadequate. We should be curious. If something looks strange, we should collect more evidence about it. And of course, it costs money. So we should spend that money and figure it out, because the public cares about it.
It's literally the number one question I think that anyone that is ever born has. Are we alone in the universe? Like, why are we not trying to answer the biggest question that we have? It shows people's motivations. Like you said, they're just trying to flex, their academic muscles, if you will. Right. So, no, I get it. I would be just as frustrated as you.
I think part of it is, part of it is, if you look at politics, what you see is polarization. So both extremes do not make much sense, at least to me, because they make, they don't, they are just believing in something without looking at the evidence, whether it supports what they are saying or not, on both sides. And the same apparently happens very often in science, because on the one side, you have the so-called experts. These are the scientists that have, base their reputation on past knowledge and therefore resist any new knowledge. So they would say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence without seeking the evidence, so that they could be proven right without the evidence. It would always be correct to say that there is no evidence because they're not seeking it. That's all.
Yeah.
So they
afraid to
are
fail,
right. By
right? You think
definition,
that's
they're
it?
right. They maintain their status as experts. Now, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Sure.
And on the other extreme, you have people who are believers. So they don't subscribe to the scientific method. They see a hole in the sky, and they would argue that's a wormhole. Okay, and I know some of these people. And that makes no sense, because we should learn from nature. We should collect evidence in the scientific way by instruments, not by eyewitness testimonies. If there is a hole in the clouds, it could be just a meteorological phenomenon. It has nothing to do with new physics. You should, if you have poor data, that doesn't imply new physics. It just means that your data is poor. Okay, and that's what many people don't understand, that, oh, I have poor data, there is some fuzz out there, some crappy data, maybe it implies new physics. Maybe, but to find new physics, you need exceptional data. You need exquisite data that beyond any reasonable doubt says standard physics cannot explain it. You know, physicists work for decades on trying to get high quality data to uncover new physics. Nobel Prizes are awarded for tiny variations in the physics as we know it, tiny. And therefore, you can't just have crappy data and say, oh, I think it's new physics. That doesn't hold water. So on the one hand, you have those believers that would say anything that is not understood is new physics based on crappy data. And then on the other side, you have the experts that do not want to collect the data. So you end up with a polarized situation that doesn't change over time. Why? Because no new data is obtained. The believers believe in it. They don't need the data. And the scientists say we don't have extraordinary data because they are not collecting it. And you end up with this stalemate. And that's exactly the situation that we were at regarding objects from other civilizations. And I'm trying to break that by getting the data. So the middle ground is not populated. This is a new path that we are carving. And it should be exciting because, like, just to give an example, in this summer 2023, we're planning an expedition to look for the relics from the first interstellar meteor that was roughly a meter in size and exploded 10 kilometers above the ocean level. Over
Papua
the
New
Pacific.
Guinea? Is that the Papua New Guinea?
Near Papua New Guinea.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I received funding at $1.5 million from an individual that was excited about it and will join us at the expedition. And we are going there to see if we can retrieve some of the fragments so that we can check whether it was a natural rock or some technological relic that is made of an artificial alloy. And that's the way to figure it out. And what do I see? I see some colleagues saying, that's a waste of time and money. Why do that? And, that to me, I think somehow they lost their childhood curiosity or their beginner's mind. It's really unfortunate. And that's why I enjoy working with young people.
With the Galileo Project, the question I had was, let's say you get some evidence. Is there any way that could be like the U.S. government could come in and take it from you or take control of your project? Is that a fear, or could that ever happen?
No, our approach is to put our observatories in places that are not of strategic importance and therefore not a matter of national security. Because the task of the Galileo Project is purely scientific. We don't care about any human-made object. So if it says made in China and the US government wants to shoot it down if it's a balloon, that's, as far as I'm concerned, good news, because they reduce the number of objects in the sky, which will make us, explore the other objects more efficiently. What we are doing scientifically is complementary to the national security concerns of the intelligence agencies in the US. And I don't see any overlap. In other words, what they care about is very boring for me. Okay, I don't care about anything made by humans. I don't care about any natural objects like birds. I would gladly offer the data to a zoologist. It's of no interest to me if we see birds. So the question is there anything else? And if there is an extraterrestrial technological gadget operating in the sky, it obviously does not care about national borders. it's not a matter of national security because it came from another place in the universe, And just like any other discovery about the universe, it should be shared. The information should be shared with all humans, So it's not, the privilege of the president of the United States to know that most of the ordinary matter in the universe is hydrogen. This was a discovery made a century ago by a former chair of the astronomy department at Harvard that I served as chair for 9 years, almost a decade. And she was also chair, and she lived in the same town that I live in. And her name is Cecilia Payne-Kapashkin. In her PhD, which was the first one in astronomy at Radcliffe, Harvard, she discovered that the surface of the sun is made mostly of hydrogen. And just think about it, such a discovery should not have been the privilege of the president of the United States. Obviously, it should have been shared, and it was shared with all humans. Okay, and the same is true if we find a technological gadget that came from outside the solar system. It should be shared by all humans. That's the way that science is done. The data will be open, available to everyone. The only scenario that I can imagine by which the US government would want the data for themselves, and that's if we collect data on something that is human-made and they care
Top
about.
secret project or something.
Yeah, or something. But first of all, we will avoid such locations where such things are flying above us. And second of all, I'll be delighted to just give it to them immediately because, as I said, these things, as far as I'm concerned, are boring.
Let's say hypothetically, Avi, we had the technology to, we had spaceships and we're out and we find a planet that has life on it. What would our approach be to check that planet out? I mean, are we going to be sending down little probes? Would we hide ourselves from them? What would our approach be? And maybe that'll give us an understanding of what we might think these things are doing to us.
Okay, so here is my thinking on that. I don't think we should send humans to interstellar travel because you will need to go through many generations and humans will not survive. We were not biologically selected to survive in space. We were, through Darwinian evolution, we were selected to live on this rock that we call Earth in the atmosphere. Because once you go to space, you are exposed to cosmic rays, very energetic particles that damage the human body. We might not survive for more than a few years. And also we live for such a short time. So I think we should send artificial intelligence systems. We have GPT-4 now. And in fact, this morning, there was a report about a letter signed by 1,100 people, including Elon Musk and Wozniak, arguing that GPT-4 should be, anything beyond GPT-4 should be banned for 6 months because they're worried about the implications for society. It just shows that we are at a threshold right now of reaching sentience with AI systems, and people are worried about it. My point is, once we reach the point where AI systems will be autonomous, we should send them to space. These would be AI astronauts, and they would much better fit to space because they could survive long journeys. We can harden them so that they don't get destroyed by cosmic rays. And they would be autonomous. They wouldn't need to wait for our guidance. And so that's the way I see space exploration, basically sending AI astronauts to pursue our goals. And what should our goals be? Well, one thing would be to replicate what we care about here on Earth. And you can have an AI system with a 3D printer visiting planets and reproducing life or even intelligent life over there, rather than carrying the astronauts with it, the human astronauts. So that's the way I think of this. Now, if another civilization had similar ideas, they could have arrived to the habitable zones of other stars, including the solar system. And, we don't know if life on Earth was not planted by some interstellar gardener. We don't know. And so the way I imagine it is that there would be a mothership coming in and then deploying probes that would do the job that they were tasked to do or pursue their goals. And the reason this is a good approach, by the way, this is the approach of a dandelion flower that has seeds spread all over to replicate its DNA and genetic information. So,
I
we
read a
can
little bit about that paper that you put out, or it's not officially out. It's a draft still, or
right.
I don't want
It's
to
a draft.
misspeak there.
This is a paper that we wrote with the director of the new office in government, AARO, Sean Kirkpatrick, after he came to visit my home, and we agreed to collaborate on a paper. And so it's my first paper in collaboration with someone from the Pentagon, but it was a fun thing to do. I mean, there is no data in it, so I was really hesitant whether to put it out or not, because as I said, I respect evidence and data. So just ideas, that may be of interest. And in fact, this got a lot of attention, but I value evidence much more than ideas. But of course, you need the ideas in order to know what to pursue. So the reason I came across this idea of dandelion seeds is because Oumuamua and the second interstellar meteor that we discovered with my student, Amir Siraj, both of them had the same distance of closest approach to the sun and the same speed when they came close to the sun. So that led me to consider the possibility that maybe the second interstellar meteor, which was much smaller than Oumuamua, it was just a meter in size, whereas Oumuamua was the size of a football field, 100 times bigger. I thought, well, maybe it's a piece of Oumuamua. Maybe it's a probe that was released by Oumuamua. If Oumuamua was the mothership. But then upon more detailed examination of the trajectory of the two objects, it became clear that they didn't arrive from the same direction. So they were not related, but at least it gave me sort of this idea. And it's an approach that we could employ in the future. In fact, I co-founded a space corporation that is called the Copernicus Space Corporation with Dr. Frank Laukian, where we are planning to use a swarm of mini probes, small probes, to explore Mars or the moon. And so we're already translating this idea to practice.
Wow, that's fascinating. I saw in an interview that you not to get dark here, but you said that you wanted to die in space. What? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Here is my wish. My wish is, Elon Musk dreams of dying on Mars. Mine is a different dream, that I will go to space on either Musk's rocket, or maybe Richard Branson's rocket, or whoever, or Jeff Bezos' rocket, and something will go wrong. So I will, my body will be floating into space in a spacesuit, and obviously I will die after a little while, and that's not my concern, because I will die anyway here on Earth. But then my hope is that I will get a kick by a planet like Jupiter out of the solar system. And then I will go into interstellar space. Okay.
Wow.
And in interstellar space, I will perhaps spend 1 billion years traveling until I will collide with another planet that is habitable around another star, and then burn up in the atmosphere of that planet as a meteor. And then my hope is that there would be an astronomer who is very curious about this interstellar meteor that just collided with their planet, and would suggest to have an expedition to retrieve fragments from that meteor that exploded, and then take those fragments for display in a museum. That would be my greatest honor, to be studied and looked at by an intelligent civilization on an exoplanet.
Wow, that is fascinating. To be honest with you, I might want the same thing now, Avi, to be honest with you. That sounds fascinating. There'll be a group of us. I like that you said spacesuit, because I don't like the idea of just floating around naked.
Oh, no.
Right? Yeah.
By the way, think about it. All humans that lived so far, except for a tiny bit of the body of one of them, I should say. But all humans died on Earth, so they had material from Earth and it was returned to Earth.
Yeah.
The exception is 30 grams of the ashes of Clyde Tombaugh were put in a small box that was attached to the spacecraft New Horizons. And I'm very embarrassed by that, because if extraterrestrials find New Horizons and examine this box, they would say, we don't want anything to do with this primitive civilization, the humans that sent this box, because what they did is burn up the ashes of a person, a scientist that they wanted to commemorate. Basically, they destroyed all the genetic information about this person. It's like the ashes of a cigarette. And this person, Clyde Tombaugh, discovered Pluto, so NASA wanted to commemorate him. And I spoke actually with the principal investigator of the New Horizons mission. And I said, why did you do that? It makes no sense to destroy the genetic information on a person that you wanted to commemorate. And he said, I said, why didn't you send a stem cell or a digital record of his DNA, right? That would make sense. Then the aliens could reconstruct him. And he said, that would have been a bureaucratic nightmare at NASA to do that. And I say, well, this is very embarrassing for our civilization to send out the ashes of a person we wanted to commemorate. And I suggested that we send another probe that would move faster than New Horizons. We'll catch up with it and apologize for that box.
It's hearing that, I completely agree. It's a little disconcerting to hear that there's a small group of people who are trying to control like the PR out in space for us. Like we don't have any say in it, like as people, like that's not fair. Well, what should we not get a say at the table about that? Right? Like
right.
It seems odd.
And also bragging and showing off, like this golden record that was sent in the on Voyager.
Sure.
I mean, frankly, I'm not very proud that the music we had back in the 60s or 70s, why should we show off? That is completely ridiculous. I like the latest music, and they had a picture of a man and a woman and all kinds of things that, who cares about it in interstellar space? I mean, I think if we send an AI system, it should pursue goals that we want to accomplish. We should not brag about ourselves. I don't think humans are something to brag about.
Wow, that's fascinating. I wonder why on that record they didn't want to include like wars and this sort of thing, like this overall picture of who we are. So we basically our first step is to lie to the ETs out there and give them a false sense of who we are.
What do you expect if you look at dating apps? Most of the time people lie about themselves. So it's human nature to imagine dating with another civilization. Obviously, you'll put a false picture of yourself over there.
That seems worrisome, to say the least.
I don't think anyone will date us, frankly, if they look at the golden record.
You're right. That's hilarious.
But I do think that I don't think we should worry about it. I think in the future we'll have a spacecraft that move much faster than those early ones, and they will overtake those early ones, and they would have much better things on them. So don't worry about it.
If you could talk, let's say an alien's here, and you got to sit down at a table with him, what's the first question you're going to want to know from this alien? What are you going to ask him?
Okay. Well, first I should say that
assuming you can communicate with them, right? Assuming that can happen.
So first I should say, just as a preface to what I want to in answer to your question, I would mention that the Nobel laureate in physics, Steve Weinberg, who was actually a professor at the University of Texas in Austin, he wrote a very famous book called The First 3 Minutes, and in it he said that the more the universe appears comprehensible to us, the more pointless it looks. And I say, well, Stephen, it looked pointless to you and everyone else that is studying the universe because you focused on lifeless objects, like elementary particles or stars or galaxies that have no life in them. If you draw a lesson from our private lives, we get a meaning from finding a partner. And the same would be true once we find another civilization, because that will give us a meaning to our cosmic existence. So now, if I had that encounter, as you asked, obviously that would be amazing as far as I'm concerned, because it might give us meaning to our life. What I would like to ask them are, some fundamental questions, like what happened before the Big Bang? Can you create a baby universe in your laboratories? Can you make life in your laboratories? These are qualities that we assign to God, in religious texts, and maybe those very advanced technological civilizations are indistinguishable from God. They are sort of capable of doing things that we associated with God in religion. And that, by the way, will bring science and religion together, because there will be something in reality that can do the kind of things we imagine God can do, just because they have a much more advanced technology that they develop. But there are other issues that, how can we live forever? Like, maybe they know how to do that. And obviously, there are some basic questions that, when did life start in the universe? How many more civilizations are out there? One thing I tell my students in class, on the first day of class, is that at Harvard, that half of them are below the median. Because in statistics, the median in every class is defined such that half of the students are below the median. So if I had to imagine humanity relative to other intelligent civilizations, I would say we are probably in the middle, and we can learn a lot from the top students in our class. We can ask them questions and we can learn from them. And I see that as an opportunity. I don't see that as a threat, because fundamentally, I'm curious to learn. I don't, it's not about showing off, not in academia, not in the context of interstellar space. We should just try and learn as much as we can.
Wow. I hope if that does happen, it's definitely someone like you that asks the questions, because mine would just be like, I don't know, what's your food? What kind of food do y'all eat over there? That would be my question.
Yeah, you want to know if they would eat you?
Yeah,
like,
eat me, exactly. I would actually want to know, what was their first impression of us, seeing us. I think that could tell us a lot about maybe even how they think. But yes,
it would give us perspective, because then you would
Sure.
realize, the things that we spend most of our time on or about may not be as exciting as what they can offer,
Yes, wow,
So by the way, I should tell you that in my class at Harvard, I asked the students, if a spaceship would land right here and you would be asked to go on it, would you go? I mean, I personally would definitely go if it's a one-way trip. But they said, only if we can share the experience through social media. So they would go on a spaceship only if they can share it with their friends. And I just couldn't understand it. Why would you not enjoy the experience? I mean,
only if I can tweet about it, right? Like, what?
Yeah.
This sounds crazy.
Yeah, and when I flew just a couple of weeks ago on a plane, I saw a girl next to me, keep taking photos of herself, and I thought to myself, why not read a book? And then, do something you're wasting your time. And so something I don't understand about young people is, why do they need to share their experience if they are on a spacecraft with an extraterrestrial technological civilization? They can learn so much more.
I couldn't agree more. Avi, I got to say, this conversation has been absolutely wonderful, and I can't wait to share it. And I got to say this as well. I'm sure you hear it from a lot of people, but what you're doing is very important. And for just normal people like myself, who are just hardworking, getting by every day, and we don't have time to focus our resources on this sort of thing, but we need people like yourself in the public sphere doing this. And so please take care of yourself. I'm glad to hear that you're jogging, eat well. I'm all about eating well. So, eat well, take care of that family and take care of yourself. And
thank you so much. And I should say, someone asked me on a podcast yesterday, he said, when you sit on an airplane next to someone and that someone asks you, what do you do? What do you say?
Wow.
And I said,
that's a good question.
I said, well, it doesn't happen to me now because people see me and know already what I'm doing.
Yeah. You're already ahead of the game. I love it. You probably get asked for a lot of selfies, which I'm sure could get annoying, but
Sure.
yeah. So thank you again for everything you're doing. And I can't wait to see forward, the new book that you got coming out in August, Interstellar. I read Extraterrestrials. It's absolutely phenomenal. Some of the papers I've tried to read, it's a little above my pay grade, if you will, but I still try. And again, shout out to Dr. Brian Keating. I absolutely love your interviews that you do with him. It's probably one of my favorite podcasts right now, Into the Impossible. So yes, shout out to that. And,
thank you so much. And it was a real pleasure speaking with you. Anytime.
Thank you so much, Avi. Have a good rest of the day. My best to you and your family. Thank you again.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.